Hey, how's it going? So, with N.A.I.C coming up, I want to do something a little bit different today and go back to the first N.A.I.C, but first we have to kind of start with the format. Now, this was before ICs were set to be right like the first format of a new set. So, there have been several major tournaments of this Primal Clash through Guardians Rising format. Basically, the defining card of this format was this Garbodor. Garbodor was a 120 HP Psychic Stage 1 Pokemon, which had the attack Trashalanche, that for one Psychic did 20 damage for each item card in your opponent's discard pile. Now, this might not seem that crazy now, but back then decks were all playing like 16, 20 items. They were super turbo. There was cards like Verse Seeker that let you, it was just an item that said grab a supporter card from your discard pile. So decks were based around the Verse Seeker engine. There was Trainer's Mail that said look at the top 4 cards of your deck and grab a trainer card you find there that's not Trainer's Mail. So we had all these super turbo ways to get decks going, and the format was just kind of too fast and too aggressive. So Pokemon printed this Garbodor card to counter it. Now, that is not too dissimilar to what's going on right now in Pokemon. We have a ton of very powerful item cards, and they went a different route this time, though they printed Eerie to kind of combat the turbo decks with item removal, which, I don't know, I kind of wish they went a route more like this. This card was very interesting. It was a little overbearing, though, like, it just completely took over the meta. This is the first form, or the first major that was held after Garbodor got released. It's just basically all Garbodors in the top 32. And I'm not 100% sure, but this might have been when day 2 of regionals was just top 32. But yeah, as you can see, it's all Garbodor decks and then some Decidueye Vileplume decks, which we're going to see in the match. Now, this is Tord's deck that he was playing in the finals of this international. This is before Tord was like a household name like he is now. He was an up-and-comer. Well, this was really before international players played together other than Worlds, because there was nationals instead of internationals, and they were region locked. So Tord had done very good at the Norwegian nationals, I think is where he's from. And yeah, he just kind of brought this Drampa Garbodor deck and Drampa Tapu Lele Garbodor deck to the IC and kind of just bodied everyone. And this would be his kind of the first time we ever got to see him. So this deck, instead of, he was just hyper focused on consistency with the 4 Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele said when you play this, it's basically Lumineon. It has Lumineon's ability, but it has Energy Drive. And Double Colorless Energy was a card which is double turbo, but it doesn't take any damage away. So for Double Colorless, it did 20 damage times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon, not affected by weakness or resistance. And it also had Tapu Cure, heal all damage from 2 your bench Pokemon. So you could use that with Psychic Energies. And this was, I believe, the second set with GX Pokemon, so we were just kind of switching over to GXs. And this is John Kettler's Decidueye Vileplume deck that he was playing. He had been doing very good at a ton of majors, and he's just been doing good. This is the only deck he played in this format. The key card that made this deck work is Forest of Giant Plants. It said each player's grass Pokemon can evolve during his or her first turn or the turn he or she plays those Pokemon. So you could just play the stadium and play down a whole evolution line of grass Pokemon. So the grass Pokemon we're playing this with is Decidueye as the attacker, and the main damage Pokemon had the ability Feather Arrow. You could just put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon just for free every turn. And it had Razor Leaf, Grass Double Colorless, 90 energy, and Hollow Hunt GX. Put 3 cards from your discard pile into your hand. This was like a really good GX attack. And we had Vileplume, Irritating Pollen. Each player can't play any item cards from his or her hand. So you could go first, play supporters, play a bunch of these Shaman cards that I'm going to explain in a second, and just turn 1 item lock your opponent, and they can do nothing about it. They're just item locked for the whole game. It's kind of crazy. And Shaman was like the engine of this deck. It had setup. You play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench. You may draw cards until you have 6 cards in your hand. There was no limit on it. You could play 4 Shamans in a turn if you wanted. And he also had Lugia EX, which had the same attack as Tapu Lele's Energy Drive in the attack Arrow Ball. It also had Deep Hurricane 80, and if there's a stadium in play, you can do 70 more damage, then discard that stadium. Yeah, so these are the decks we're going to see. And it's a pretty good matchup. I will say, I should explain Drampa. Drampa. This card was very strong for its time. It had Righteous Edge for 1 colorless 20, discard a special energy from your opponent's active. Then for 3 colorless, it had Berserk 80, and you do 70 more damage if any of your bench Pokemon had damage counters on it. And then Big Wheel GX. Shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 10 cards. So, pretty good card. Combined with Choice Band, Drampa could do 180 damage, which was like the magic number back then. Like, it's kind of like how 220 is now, or 280. It's more like 280 now. It was 180 then. Choice Band said you do 30 more damage to your opponent's active GX or EX. Yeah, and Rainbow Energy is how we're going to set up the damage for the bench Pokemon. It provides every type of energy, but only 1 energy at a time. And when you play it, you put 1 damage counter on that Pokemon. A lot of people were playing a Stadium Magma Basin that put damage on your Pokemon when you benched them to get damage for Drampa, but Tord opted to not help his opponent and play Rainbow Energy and play a much slower game because you can't attach the Rainbow to the Drampa and get the effect. You have to attach it to the bench and then next turn attach an energy. And the one main difference from decks now you'll see is there is no energy acceleration in this deck. Either of these decks. You are just attaching energies and attacking. I don't know, I kind of wish we would go back to a format like that. But let's check out the game. Alright, so unfortunately I think I have to do this not full screen because it just kind of freezes a bunch. But Tord won the coin flip and chose to go first, which is very good for this matchup because John can item lock him turn 1. He definitely doesn't want that. He wants to be able to play out his Ultra Balls and, more importantly, get a Trubbish and put a tool card on it. Tools were still items back then, and the Trubbish can evolve into the Garbotox and Garbodor that, if it has a tool attached to it, it shuts off all abilities, so he can shut off that irritating pollen from John. He's just going to Ultra Ball for Bridget. Bridget let you put 3 basic Pokemon from your deck onto your bench. It was a really good setup card once Tapu Lele came out because it gave people the ability to consistently find it on their first turn of the game. Yep, and he's got his energy attachment. And his only tool in hand right now is a Choice Band, which is kind of rough because if he puts it on the Trubbish because this might be the only turn that he can play tool cards, but it could get the Garbodor stuck in the active, which would be very unfortunate for him because John could Lysander up the Garbodor, which is Boss, the old version of Boss, and then just Decidueye, Feather, or Arrow all of his Pokemon to death, which would be very unfortunate for Tord. That'd be a rough way to lose. John's going to play a Level Ball. I think this was the first time Level Ball was ever printed. We also just lost that card. It's kind of unfortunate. It was a nice card to have around. Right, John's going to get a Oddish with that Level Ball. And ideally what he wants to do is play this Forest of Giant Plant Stadium down and play all the Pokemon and energy and trainer cards out of his hand, and then use Shaman to draw back up. And that leads to a pretty powerful first turn, especially with the ability to evolve all your Pokemon right away. And he Ultra Balls away the Oddish and the Gloom, so I'm guessing he has a Revitalizer in hand that was an item that said grab 2 grass Pokemon from your discard and put them in your hand. Really strong Pokemon recovery, and yeah, he does have that. So he was basically able to Ultra Ball for 1 card, like Ultra Ball 1 card away to grab the Pokemon he needed. He's just debating how to play his hand down, and he's able to Shaman up to 6. He gets to the Dartrix. So since this deck plays no rare candies, it's all like 4-4-3 and like 2-2-2 lines and stuff, just to evolve all your Pokemon all the way up. Or I think the Decidueye line was 4-4-4 actually. And if you get 3 or 4 Decidueyes out, those 20 damage pings start to add up really quick, because Pokemon did not have 300 HP. Like, not even close. I think Decidueye had 240 or 230. He plays down another Shaman. It's kind of crazy. They definitely are careful not to print cards like this anymore. He's just able to slam down that whole evolution line. Yeah, Decidueye had 240, and I think 250 was like as high as it got for HP back then, which was even absurd at the time that Pokemon got to 250. But he puts the Feather Arrow damage onto the Drampa because he doesn't want to power up Drampa's Berserk attack by putting it on another Pokemon. So he puts it on the one with the energy. And Tor just slams the Sycamore. And now he's kind of forced to play down his item cards, kind of guess what supporter he's going to need next turn. And he has a Floatstone and a Field Blower in his hand. So he has the kind of awkward choice here of if he wants to be able to attack this turn, or if he wants to Field Blower the Choice Band away and attach the Floatstone to the Trubbish, or attach the Floatstone to the active and retreat this Tapu Lele. And Floatstone, of course, gave the Pokemon it was attached to free retreat. And he opts to do neither of those, which is kind of interesting. That's why Tort's better than me. I probably would have started doing something. But now John gets another free turn, which is just what he wants. This was such a fun time for Pokemon. Right when everyone started to know who each other's were. So John's like, I want to win, like, my own international. We gotta have an American win it or whatever. Because that was kind of the thing. You wanted to, like, win your own international of where you were from. When he's able to boss up that Decidueye and put the Rainbow Energy on the Lele to retreat it to power up his Berserk attack. He plays the Super Rod right away because he might not get another chance. He's already gotten pretty lucky to get these extra 2 turns of item cards. It's kind of funny how they're like cutting each other's decks back. I always thought that was kind of like a spiteful cut. I don't know. Like, it was just a different time. The energy was different for Pokemon. And he's able to hit that Decidueye for 150. So he wants to get these Decidueyes out of play. The damage can just add up so insanely quick, but John does have a Floatstone, but that importantly does not allow him to put the Floatstone onto the Vileplume, and Vileplume has like 4 retreat or 3 retreat. And he uses his Feather Arrow. This was kind of a funny thing too, where people would forget to use Feather Arrows often, and it was always funny to see on stream. And he's able to knock out that Tapu Lele that Drampa with Tapu Lele's Energy Drive. It's so interesting how quick that little bit of damage adds up. Now, since Tort still isn't item locked, he is just able to use this Choice Band for a Trashland Scarbador. I'm surprised. I thought he had a Floatstone in hand. I'm surprised he didn't put it on the other Trubbish. But N is basically like Iono, but it wasn't put the cards to the bottom, it was shuffle. And he does hit the Trashland Garb. I think that die at the bottom is noting that there's 6 items in the discard pile. So that would not be enough for a knockout. That would be kind of unfortunate. So it would only be 150. Oh no, it wasn't updated because he Field Blowered, and I don't think they ever changed the number on the die or added a second one, or the second one's just off screen. So yeah, now this just turned into like hitting back and forth, and John probably doesn't have a meaningful attack this turn. He finally hits the Vileplume though. He might just be forced to Hollow Hunt this turn. which is just grab 3 cards from your discard pile, and he can kind of set up for like whatever game-winning play he wants to do. He puts the 20 on the other Trubbish. Perhaps he's trying to set up for a boss play on that. And Decidueye's attack only does 90, and I think the Garbotoxin Garbodor had 100 HP if I remember correctly. Yeah, he's just checking his discard for what he wants to Hollow Hunt for. He's going to grab Revitalizer in case his Vileplume gets knocked out. Another Forest, so he can just slam it back down. And he's thinking about the double colorless too, just to guaranteed have a attack for 90 next turn. If there was a Lysander in there, he might want to grab that too. Oh, he was thinking about grabbing the Olympia, which is basically switch card on a supporter card, except you could switch evolution Pokemon too. Towards just checking the discard pile. But most importantly, his Garbodor still lived. So now he's got multiple easy knockouts on the board. He could knock out the bench Decidueye and then knock out a Shaman for game. He's going to Tapu Lele for N. Just to get that, because John basically got whatever 3 cards he wanted in his hand, so he's got to disrupt it. And it looks like the judges are saying something. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to do some videos going over of what I think are some of the best games of all time. And I do think this is one of them. Well, this is just like the first, not the first IC. The first IC was EUIC, but kind of the first time we got to know who Tord was at a international level. And this was the start of his kind of rampage, just winning everything. John attaches that double colorless. There's still no Garbotoxin. Tord would really like to get a Garbotoxin Garb in play, I think, to stop these feather arrows. They are really annoying. They definitely add up. Oh, and he top decked a Trashlanch Garb. So now he's got the awkward decision of evolving it. He does, because he's just saying, I don't even need Garbotox in this game. I think I can just win without it. He misses the Psychic Energy, but hits the Garbotox, and that is unfortunate. But luckily, he can still knock out this Decidueye with the Berserk attack. And now he takes away 20 damage from John and goes down to 2 prizes. If John has an N to 2 right here, that would be pretty disgusting. I don't know if he has anything, actually. He's gonna... Oh, no, he does have the N. He's gonna N and then use Shaman's Sky Return attack that does 30 damage. You put Shaman back in your hand, and then he'll have a double colorless and a draw effect for next turn, which is pretty good, because Tord has no threat of getting a Garbotoxin Garb down. He's not going to forget to use that feather arrow. And now, at this point, this is where if John had item lock in play all game, Tord would probably just draw 2 item cards off of this N and not be able to do anything. But Tord got to play quite a few of his items out. Oh, and John's just thinking about promoting that Vileplume. Really? That's interesting. I wonder what exactly his thought is there. And he gets N back. Interesting. I think he wants his Vileplume to be knocked out so he can play item cards next turn. Because he does not have math set up for... He probably just wants to reestablish his board. Get down 1 or 2 more Decidueyes. And then start setting up for his final couple of prizes. Now this is interesting. Will Tord pass or take the knockout? Nope, he just does 20. I like that. John draws back into the Shaman. Tord would probably really like to have a Garbotoxin in play, but he also definitely wants to have the Trashlanch Garb in play, because that's going to be how he takes his final prizes. And John's going to notice that and just start pinging it down. Oh, he gets Tapu Lele for boss 4 game. The 4 Tapu Lele coming in clutch. John was probably like, you play 4? And Tord's like, yeah, you see why. So I think a lot of these decks were playing like 2 or 3, and you know, like I said, you're spending a couple $100 just to buy 4 Tapu Lele. Alright, now John gets to go first this game, so he's gonna try to get a turn 1 item lock. Oh no, but he only gets the Shaman for 2. Hits the Forest though, and plays a Research. I remember when they first announced the change of no supporters, everyone was like super against it, but at this point, looking back on it, being able to play a supporter on your first turn was kind of broken. Because everyone just chose to go first. No one ever chose to go second. And it's a lot cooler now where you actually have to think about if you want to go first or second with a deck, when back then you're like, nope, first. Whoever won the coin flip, you were flipping to see who went first, basically. I can't really... I'm sure there was like a couple decks over the times, like there's deck Buzzwole that you could go second, but you really didn't need to. Like there was no need to go second. You just would go first and set up your board as much as possible with no downside at all. And John does not get a Vileplume again. I wonder if this would have been like a much different finals probably if John had gotten a Vileplume either game, because Tord's hand is... Oh, he had an N at least, but you never know when you're just going to N into a bunch of item cards and still not be able to do anything. So yeah, this finals might have been like defined by John not being able to get out of turn 1 Vileplume, which he probably did during a lot of the games that he played throughout the day. And Tord just goes for the classic play of Tapu Lele for Bridget. And Bridget for 3 Pokemon. Yeah, I never really thought about that. Because this Decidueye deck really needed to slow the game down, because you're just doing like 20 to 60 damage a turn with Feather Arrows. He's doing the hand motion because Tord used Big Wheel GX, which basically said your opponent plays an N. Yeah, see, John doesn't even cut just because he's going to play an N. He already knows it. And if you ever got to keep the Big Wheel, your turn would be insane. But you're able to just... You can kind of use it in situations where you're like, oh, my hand is dead. I kind of want my opponent to disrupt my hand. And it also stops them from playing a more powerful supporter like Sycamore. Because this is why Iono is so strong. You could N and draw back into the same exact 6 cards that you had in your hand. But with Iono, you're guaranteed to see a new 6 cards, which is almost like a Research or Sycamore. Just 1 card short. He's going to Ultra Ball for the Gloom, and he can get Vileplume out. And I didn't see if he had a Grass in his hand. Oh, he does, so he can start putting on a lot of pressure now. This is like more when this deck's going to shine a little more. So now Tord has to do everything without any items. And the Burst Seeker was such an important card back then. So it lets you play less of each count of supporter card with a similar amount of consistency. But he does play 4 Lele, so he can still get whatever card he wants. He's just going to boss that Vileplume up. And he's not going to knock it out, but that thing is probably not going anywhere unless John has his Olympia in his hand. He's going to retreat and hit it for 80, which is interesting. Oh yeah, because now he can knock it out this next turn. He can research and attach to his next Drampa. He had to research away 2 tools, which feels kind of bad, but he needed an attachment this turn to get going. And now he can play item cards next turn as long as John doesn't get enough items to get back his Vile Plume. And he starts out with the Trainer's Mail and fails it, which is kind of unfortunate. He saw another Trainer's Mail, but of course you can't grab Trainer's Mail with Trainer's Mail. It looks like he's preparing for a Hollow Hunt, maybe? No, he's got to knock out this Garbodor. Or I would think, at least. John knows better than me, though. Yeah, I kind of thought he had to, because that thing's putting on a lot of pressure at this point. And Tord can play items this turn, which is super clutch, because if he can just Garbotoxin and Ability Lock, John's damage, like he's two-shotting the Drampa, but the Drampa's two-shotting him. And two-shotting a stage 2 versus two-shotting a basic, like they both take 2 energy attachments, but one requires 3 Pokemon to evolve it up. Yeah, Tord is going to grab that Garbotoxin and just kind of shut John's deck down. He can also Righteous Edge and discard this double colorless energy and force John to take a turn to Hollow Hunt. He's just gonna preemptively play that Burst Seeker, one of my favorite Burst Seeker arts. But he's got to also be careful with his energy attachments, because that Lugia is on the bench with the Arrow Ball attack. That is gonna add up pretty quick with enough energy attached to this Drampa. I like that Tord attaches to the bench to power up the Berserk attack and also get ahead on an attachment. And of course, it's going to be the right play, because Tord's the one that's won 4 ICs and not me. I didn't see what card he just played. I think it was an Ultra Ball getting rid of a Lele and a Decidueye. Yeah, to get down at Dartrix. Not being able to use his Feather Arrows this turn is kind of rough. This whole deck is like revolves around Feather Arrow, because 90 is just, it's not enough damage, especially on a stage 2. Oh, and he does have to Hollow Hunt this turn, and that uses up his attack too. So John is not in a great spot this game either. He wants to grab that double colorless, but he needs a Sycamore because his hand is dead. He really needed like all 3 of those cards, and they just get end back into the deck. Now I wonder if Tord gets Teammates. That was such a fun card. It said if one of your Pokemon were knocked out last turn, search your deck for any 2 cards. Kind of an insane effect. It was like Raihan, but without you trade the energy acceleration for an extra card. It really like enabled 1 prize decks, because with 2 prize decks you only got 2 turns that you could use Teammates, but with 1 prize decks you could Teammates 5 times. So you could revolve your whole deck around just using Teammates to get the 2 cards that you want. Really cool card. I would hope we get another card like that at some point, because it was kind of like the spiritual reprint of Twins, which was the same, but instead of your Pokemon being knocked out, you had to be behind on prize cards. And I don't know, it might be a little too strong right now with all the powerful item cards that we have. But I would like if the game slowed down a bit, personally. I wouldn't mind it. All this energy acceleration is kind of ridiculous. Kind of absurd. When he just Burst Seekers for Lysander, just in case John gets out another Vile Plume. And John is still ability locked, so his damage is very limited. If he has to 2-shot this Garbodor, that would feel so bad. But yeah, he's gonna have a, 20, 40, 60. That Lugia is doing 60 damage. So he could do up to 100 if he evolves up 2 to Decidueye and gets a Field Blower. Yeah, that's not enough damage. This is not looking great for John. I wish I could remember if this was a bad matchup or a good matchup for Tord's deck. I think it was a bad matchup for John because of the Garbotoxin. I think it really depended on who won the coin flip and if it got turn 1 item lock versus if Drampagarb gets a tool on a Trubbish. Yeah, Tord was like barely item locked these whole 2 games so far. So I think like 3 turns. It's kind of crazy like seeing a 2 prize Pokemon 2-shot a 1 prize Pokemon. That would never happen now, but that was kind of what ended up happening a lot back then with this Garbodor. Like 120 HP was quite a lot. I remember I used to play a lot of Buzzrock, and if you didn't have 3 fighting energies on your Buzzwole GX, or it was the turn that you could do 120 damage with your baby Buzzwole, you just couldn't do anything about Garbodor, and it was so hard to play around the items because Buzzwole was weak to Psychic. So you only needed a few items to get knocked out, and a lot of the deck was items. Yeah, so Tord's gonna retreat and one-shot this Lugia. Wait. Oh yeah, those prizes aren't right up in the corner. I was gonna say, what's he debating? He just wins, but he must have had 3 prizes left, I think. I don't know, I'm surprised the graphics wrong. And I really don't see what John can do to come back from this. He's ability locked. Even if he item lock, he can't item lock unless he gets rid of that tool card. He can't barely do any damage without his abilities. He can't do any damage this turn actually, because he just attached that grass. So he can get the Vileplume out, but the ability is not going to work because that tool card is still on that Garbodor. This stadium was so crazy, they banned it right after it rotated. It would be interesting to have another stadium like this around because grass Pokemon haven't been good in quite a while. The only reason they're almost good now is just because Charizard was weak to grass, but I don't know, a lot of Charizard, people have kind of written off Charizard, but I don't think it really has gotten that much worse. The card is just so insanely strong. I just don't see it going from 26% and winning a lot of the stuff or being like the BDIF to not being played at all or doing well at all. John's like almost decked out here. He could potentially get that Vileplume bossed up and just run out of cards in his deck. That would be funny. I think he still has access to his Olympia though. Oh, and he field blowers the tool. So now he's just going to try to tank hits here and figure out a way to probably be able to knock out the bench Drampa and one of the 1 prize Pokemon in a single turn. And Tord just shows him the boss and he just takes the set. But that was the first N.A.I.C. I want to do some more of these videos because I think there's a lot of classic games that everyone should watch. So hopefully you enjoyed and take care.